He watched her step toward the richest man in the valley, and only then realized she had never been waiting for him. The boards creak under her boots as she moves past the counter, the folded dress brushing against her fingers. Outside, a horse snorts and stamps, dust rising in the noon heat. The rancher stands still, hat in hand. Behind him, the cowboy doesn't move, just watching, jaw tight, like he's run out of time without knowing when it started. Then she stops, not where anyone expected. Follow for more. By the time the sun cleared the ridge east of Dust Creek, the line had already formed. Boots scraped against the wooden porch outside the supply station. Spurs clicked. Men stood with hats pulled low, shoulders dusty from the road, waiting their turn. Some leaned against the railing. Some said nothing at all. The morning carried the smell of dry earth, leather, and coffee gone cold. Inside, Lila Harper stood behind the counter with her ledger open. She didn't look up right away when the door swung open. She marked a number, blew lightly across the ink, then turned the page. Her pencil rested behind her ear, a habit she never noticed anymore. A small scale sat to her right, weights lined in a neat row, everything in its place. 3 pounds of nails, a man said. She nodded once, already reaching for the tin box. No wasted movement. She poured the nails onto the scale, adjusted a weight with 2 fingers, then wrapped them in brown paper. The man dropped coins on the counter. Didn't meet her eyes. Most didn't. Next, someone called from the porch. They came through one after another. Rope, flour, lamp oil, tobacco. Each transaction clean and quick. A few glances lingered a second too long. Curious, but not enough to matter. No one stayed. No one ever stayed. Out on the porch, voices drifted in. "That's her," one man muttered under his breath. Not unkind, just a fact. Lila slid the coins into the drawer and closed it with a soft click. The sound settled into the room like it belonged there. Late morning, the line thinned. That was when the horse came. You could hear it before you saw it. Steady, measured hooves on packed dirt, not hurried, not uncertain. The kind of sound that made men shift slightly where they stood. The door opened, and Walter Grayson stepped inside. He didn't remove his hat right away. Just stood there a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dimmer light. His coat was clean despite the road. Boots polished, though the dust tried its best. Everything about him carried weight, not loud, but undeniable. Lila looked up, just once. "Morning," she said. Her voice didn't change for him. He walked to the counter, slow, deliberate. Not browsing, not pretending to need anything. "You keep the accounts here?" he asked. "I do." He nodded, like that confirmed something he'd already decided. His gaze rested on her a second longer than most men allowed themselves. Not sharp, not soft either, just measuring. Then he reached into his pocket, set a small folded receipt on the counter. "Need this tallied," he said. She opened it, glanced down, and began writing without comment. Numbers moved across the page. Her pencil didn't hesitate. Walter watched her hands, not her face. When she finished, she slid the paper back. "That's your total." He didn't pick it up right away. Instead, he looked at her again, like he was trying to place something he hadn't quite found yet. Then he nodded once, took the receipt, and left. The door closed behind him. The room felt the same as before. Almost. By afternoon, the heat had settled in. Dust Creek always went quiet for a stretch after noon. Even the wind seemed to step back and wait. Lila stood at the back shelf, reorganizing a crate of dry goods, moving jars 1 inch at a time until they lined up just right. The door creaked again. This time, she didn't need to look. Afternoon, Jonah Pike said. His voice came easy, like it had been in the room before him. Lila turned, already reaching for the coiled leather hanging near the wall. Afternoon. He stepped inside, hat pushed back just enough to show the line where the sun had caught his forehead. Shirt sleeves rolled, dust on his boots, same as always. Need a new rein, he said. Last one snapped near the creak. She nodded, brought it over, and set it on the counter. He picked it up, tested the weight. Feels right. It'll hold, she said. He gave a small half smile. You always say that. And it always does. A pause. Not awkward, just there. He set a few coins down. She counted them without looking up. Outside, a wagon rattled past. Somewhere down the street, someone was hammering, slow, steady strikes against wood. Jonah glanced toward the door, then back at her. You staying cool in here? Best I can. Another pause. He shifted his weight slightly, like he might say something else. He didn't. Instead, he picked up the rein, gave her a small nod, and turned toward the door. See you around, Lila. See you. The door closed behind him. The room settled again. Lila stood there a moment longer than necessary. The counter still held the faint impression where his hand had rested. She reached for her ledger, flipped it open, and ran her fingers along the edge of the page. Then she adjusted it, just slightly, as if something had been out of place. Outside, the afternoon stretched wide and empty. Inside, the pencil moved again, steady as ever. No one watching would have noticed anything change, and maybe nothing had. But as the light shifted across the wooden floor, it caught the edge of the counter where she had paused, just long enough to feel like something familiar had slipped past her, without asking to be held. Dust Creek carried on the way it always did, and Lila Harper remained exactly where she had been. Not chosen, not leaving, just there. By the third morning, the dust on Main Street hadn't settled before people started talking. It moved quiet at first. A word passed over a coffee cup at the corner table. A glance traded outside the barber shop. Then louder, carried on the wind like everything else in Dust Creek. Walter Grayson had come back. Lila heard it before she saw him. Two men at the counter leaned closer than usual, voices low, but not low enough. He's not here for supplies. No man rides 10 miles for rope he doesn't need. Lila kept writing. The pencil moved steady across the page. Numbers didn't change because people talked. Ink didn't care who walked through the door. Still, when the sound of that same measured horse came again, her hand slowed, just a fraction. The door opened. Walter stepped in like he had already been expected. This time he removed his hat. Not all the way, just enough. "Morning," he said. "Morning." No one else spoke. A man near the flour sacks shifted his weight, then stepped aside like he suddenly remembered somewhere else to be. Walter didn't go to the shelves. He came straight to the counter. "I spoke with Mr. Darnell," he said, nodding toward the back room where the station owner kept his office. "He tells me you keep this place running." Lila closed the ledger. "I do my part." He studied her a moment, not hurried, not unsure. "I'll be plain," he said. Outside, a wagon rolled past, wheels creaking slow over the dry boards of the street. "I don't need a wife who sits in a parlor," he continued. "I need someone who knows figures, someone who can keep order." Lila didn't answer. Walter rested one hand on the counter, gloved fingers tapping once, then stilling. "My ranch is 20 miles west," he said. "It runs well enough. Could run better." A pause. "I'm offering you a place there, as my wife." The room held its breath. Lila heard it. Not silence, not quite, but that shift when people stop pretending not to listen. She looked at him then, fully this time. "You don't know me," she said. "I know enough." His voice didn't rise, didn't soften either. "I've watched this town long enough to see who does the work and who takes credit for it." The words landed without force. That was what made them stay. Behind her, a shelf creaked as the heat settled into the wood. Lila's fingers rested on the edge of the ledger. Not gripping. Just there. "You'll have a house, Mom," Walter went on. "Your own accounts. Proper standing." Standing. That word traveled farther than the rest. A man near the door coughed into his hand, then stepped outside without buying anything. Lila glanced past Walter, toward the open doorway. The light out there was too bright to look at for long. "I don't answer things like this quick," she said. Walter nodded once. "I didn't expect you would." He reached into his coat and set a small folded paper on the counter. Not a contract, just a note. "I'll give you 7 days," he said. No pressure in his tone. That was the pressure. After that, I'll need an answer. He slid the paper a little closer to her, then straightened. "Good day, Miss Harper." He turned and walked out. The door closed. The sound of his horse carried away slow and certain, like it had somewhere worth going. Inside, the room filled back up. Voices didn't start all at once. They came in pieces. "You hear that? 7 days. She'd be a fool." Lila opened the ledger again. The page waited where she had left it. She picked up the pencil. For a moment, the tip hovered above the paper. Then it touched down and kept moving. By afternoon, the story had already outrun the heat. Men came in who didn't need anything. Women passed by slower than usual, glancing through the window without stopping. Someone laughed too loud across the street. Lila measured flour for a customer and didn't spill a grain. Near dusk, when the light turned thin and the shadows stretched long across the boards, the door opened again. Jonah Pike stepped in. He didn't look around first. Just came in like always, dust on his boots, hat low. "Evening," he said. "Evening." He set a small coil of worn leather on the counter. "Think this can be patched?" Lila took it, ran her fingers along the split. "It'll hold a while," she said. "Not forever." "That's all I need." She nodded, reached for a strip of binding. Jonah rested his hands on the counter, watching her work. "Not close, nah, not far." Outside, someone called out to another man. A dog barked once, then quieted. "You hear about Grayson?" he asked, like he was asking about the weather. Lila didn't stop working. "I heard." He shifted slightly. "Folks saying he made you an offer." "They say a lot of things." "That one true?" Her hand slowed, just enough to notice. Then she tied off the leather and set it down. "He asked," she said. Jonah nodded once. "Sounds like a good offer." It wasn't said careless, just even. Lila wiped her hands on a cloth. "It is." A pause settled between them. Jonah picked up the repaired leather, tested the tension. 7 days, he said, almost to himself. Lila didn't answer. He set a coin on the counter. "See you around, Lila." "See you." He turned and left. Didn't look back. The door closed softer this time. Lila stood there a moment longer than she needed to. Then she reached for the folded paper Walter had left. She didn't open it, just held it between her fingers, feeling the crease where it had been folded once, and only once. Outside, the last light slipped off the ridge. Dust Creek settled into evening, and inside the station, Lila Harper stood where she had always stood. Only now, the space around her felt narrower, like something had stepped closer and would not wait. By the 4th day, the town had already decided for her. It showed in small ways. Mrs. Darnell wiped the counter twice where it didn't need wiping. A man who had owed on his account for weeks paid in full without being asked. Someone left a bolt of cloth near the back shelf with no name attached. Just a quiet offering, like a nod toward a future already agreed upon. Lila said nothing. She worked the same hours, opened the ledger at the same page, measured the same flour, counted the same coins. But by late afternoon, when the light slanted low through the front window, she began setting things aside. Not all at once. A folded apron placed neatly at the bottom of a crate. A stack of old receipts tied with string and tucked into a drawer. The small key to the storage room left on the counter a little longer than usual before she picked it up again. That evening, when she closed the door, she didn't turn toward the south end of town. She went the other way, toward the small room she rented above the tailor's shop. Inside, the air held the faint smell of soap and pressed cloth. Her bed was narrow, the blanket folded clean. A tin basin sat by the window, water still from the morning. Lila set her bag down and stood there a moment. Then she opened the trunk at the foot of the bed. It wasn't full. A few dresses, a second pair of boots, a stack of letters tied in blue ribbon she never untied anymore. She picked up one dress, held it at the shoulders, looked at it without really seeing it, then folded it again, carefully. On the fifth day, she didn't go by the stables. It was the first time in months. Jonah noticed. Not at first. Not in the way a man notices something missing and names it. More like a quiet shift in the day. A space where something should have been. He finished mending a saddle strap, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked toward the road without thinking why. No one was there. By noon, he found himself standing at the edge of the yard, watching the path that led back toward the supply station. He stayed there longer than he meant to, then turned back to his work. That night, the weather broke. Clouds rolled in from the west, low and heavy, pressing the heat down until the air felt close. By dusk, the first drops came, slow, spaced apart, tapping against the wooden roof like someone testing the boards. Lila stood under the awning outside the station, arms folded lightly, watching the rain gather in the dust. It didn't fall hard. Not enough to wash anything clean. Just enough to darken the ground in uneven patches. Across the street, the lantern outside the livery swayed once in the wind. She looked that way, held it a moment. The door to the stable opened. A figure stepped out, hat pulled low, shoulders outlined by the lamplight behind him. Jonah. He paused under the overhang, like he had come out for something and forgotten what it was. Rain tapped softly between them. Lila didn't move. Neither did he. A wagon passed behind her, wheels cutting shallow lines in the damp dirt. The driver didn't look their way. Jonah shifted his weight once like he might step forward. He didn't. After a while, he reached up, adjusted his hat, and turned back inside. The door closed. The lantern stilled. Lila stayed where she was until the rain stopped. On the sixth morning, a package arrived, wrapped in brown paper, tied with clean twine. No dust on it. Mr. Darnell set it on the counter without comment. "For you," he said. Lila looked at it a long moment before touching it. The paper came away easily. Inside was a dress, cream-colored, fine stitching, the kind of fabric that didn't belong to Dust Creek. She lifted it slightly, just enough to feel the weight of it, held it up once, then lowered it again. "You'll need something proper," Mr. Darnell said from behind her. Not unkind, not pressing. Lila folded the dress back into the paper. That afternoon, she closed the ledger earlier than usual, took the key from her pocket, and set it on the counter. Not pushed forward, just placed there. Mr. Darnell saw it, said nothing, She walked out before the last customer arrived, up the stairs, into her room. The dress lay across the bed. Lila stood beside it, fingers brushing the fabric once, then pulling back. She didn't try it on right away. When she finally did, it didn't sit right on her shoulders. A little too narrow, a little too stiff. She looked at herself in the small mirror by the window. Didn't turn. Didn't adjust. Just stood there. Then she stepped out of it, folded it again, and set it at the edge of the bed. The next morning would be the 7th day. By dusk, the town would expect an answer. Lila sat at the small table by the window, her ledger open in front of her, though there was nothing left to write. Outside, Dust Creek moved the way it always did. Inside, something had already begun to leave. Not all at once, but enough. Enough that when morning came, it would not be waiting for her to decide. It would already be decided. Jonah Pike had been awake long before sunrise. Not by habit, not by work, just awake. The stable sat quiet around him, the smell of hay and leather settling heavy in the still air. A lantern burned low on the far wall, its flame barely moving. He stood with one hand resting on the rail of an empty stall. Didn't move. Didn't reach for anything. The world outside hadn't started yet, but something inside him had already shifted, and it didn't settle back. Footsteps came in from behind. "Thought I'd find you here." Eli Boone leaned against the post, hat tipped back, eyes taking in more than he let on. Jonah didn't turn. "Too early for talk," he said. Eli gave a quiet breath, half a laugh. "Then I'll keep it short." He pushed off the post, walked a few steps closer. "That woman at the station, Lila, she turned down every man in this town for years." Jonah's hand tightened slightly on the rail. Eli watched it, then went on. "You know that." Jonah said nothing. Eli's voice lowered. "What you don't seem to know is why." The horse in the next stall shifted, stamping once against the packed dirt. Jonah finally turned. "What are you getting at?" Eli held his gaze. "She's been waiting on someone." A pause. "For a long time." Jonah frowned slightly, like the words didn't land right. "That ain't my concern." Eli shook his head once. "That's where you're wrong." He stepped closer, not enough to crowd, just enough to be heard. "She's been waiting on you." The stable didn't move. The sound of the horse settled. The lantern flickered once, then steadied. Jonah stared at him. "That don't make sense." Eli didn't argue. "Don't have to make sense to be true." Jonah looked away, toward the open door where the first light was starting to touch the horizon. "She never said anything." Eli gave a small shrug. "Neither did you." That hung there, longer than anything else. Eli tipped his hat down again. "Grayson's coming today," he said. "By noon, if what I heard's right." Jonah didn't answer. Eli stepped back toward the door. "I'd think on what you're about to let walk out of this town," he added. "Some things don't circle back." Then he was gone. The door creaked shut behind him. Jonah stood there, the words settling in slow, uneven pieces. "She's been waiting on you." He pushed off the rail, walked once across the stable, then stopped. His hands hung at his sides. Nothing to fix, nothing to mend. For the first time in a long while, he had nothing to do with them. Outside, the day had already begun. By mid-morning, Dust Creek was awake in full. Men gathered along the boardwalk. A wagon stopped longer than it needed to. Even the wind seemed to carry voices instead of dust. At the station, the door stayed open. Lila stood inside, the ledger closed. The key rested on the counter, not in her pocket. The dress lay folded upstairs, untouched since the night before. She wore the same work clothes as always, only cleaner. Walter Grayson's horse came into view just before noon. You could feel it before you saw it. The way people straightened, the way conversations dipped, then picked up again in a lower tone. He rode up slow, dismounted without hurry, tied the reins like he expected to stay. Inside, Lila didn't move from where she stood. The bell above the door rang once as he stepped in. "Miss Harper?" "Mr. Grayson." He took off his hat this time, fully. "I trust you've considered my offer." "I have." A pause. Outside, someone coughed. Boots shifted on wood. Walter nodded once. "I'd like your answer." Lila's fingers rested lightly on the counter, not gripping, not pulling away. Before she could speak, the door opened again. This time, faster. Jonah Pike stepped in, breath a touch shorter than usual, hat still on, dust rising faintly from his boots. The room shifted. Walter turned slightly, measuring him in one glance. Jonah didn't look at him. He looked at Lila. Really looked. Like he had missed something before and wasn't willing to miss it again. "Lila," he said. Her name sat different in the room this time. Walter's gaze moved between them. "I wasn't aware this was a discussion," he said evenly. Jonah didn't answer him. "I need a word," Jonah said, still looking at her. Walter stepped back half a pace, not yielding, just allowing. "This concerns her answer," he said. Lila didn't move. For a second, no one did. Then she stepped out from behind the counter, walked past Walter, stopped a few feet from Jonah, close enough to hear him without the rest of the room needing to. "What is it?" she asked. Jonah took a breath. Not steady. Not like him. "I heard about Grayson," he said. She nodded once. "I figured you would." He rubbed his thumb along the side of his hand, like he was searching for something that had always been there but never used. "I don't have a right to say much," he went on. "Not after I kept quiet as long as I did." Lila's face didn't change, but she didn't look away. Jonah swallowed once. "I thought—" He stopped. Started again. "I thought you were set somewhere I couldn't reach." The words came out plain. No polish. "I was wrong." The wind outside picked up, pushing a line of dust across the street. Lila waited. Jonah met her eyes. "I should have said it sooner," he said. "Should have known it sooner, but I didn't." A pause. Then, quieter. "I don't want to stand here and watch you walk off thinking nobody ever saw you." That landed. Not loud, but it stayed. "I see you," he said. The room held still. Lila looked at him for a long time, long enough for the moment to settle into something that couldn't be taken back. Then she spoke. Soft. Clear. "I stopped waiting." Jonah didn't move. The words didn't strike him like a blow. They settled slower than that, like something already true being said out loud for the first time. "I know," he said. Another pause. Longer this time. Neither of them looked away. Outside, a board creaked under someone's weight. Walter shifted slightly behind them, not interrupting, just present. Lila's voice came again. "I waited because I chose to," she said, "not because I had to." Jonah nodded once. "I understand that now." She studied him, like she was deciding something that had already been decided somewhere else. Then she stepped back. Not far, just enough. "Mr. Grayson's waiting," she said. Jonah didn't reach for her, didn't stop her. He stepped aside, let her pass. Lila walked back to the counter. Walter straightened, hat still in his hand. "Well?" he asked. Lila rested her hand lightly on the wood. The key sat just inches from her fingers. The whole town seemed to lean in without moving. And for the first time, the answer wasn't waiting on anyone else to speak first. Lila didn't reach for the key. She didn't reach for anything. Walter stood across from her, steady as ever, hat in hand, patience worn like a well-fitted coat. Behind him, through the open door, the town lingered, shapes and shadows, pretending not to watch. Jonah stayed where he had stepped aside. He didn't speak again. Didn't try to claim the moment he had almost missed. Lila looked at Walter first. "You offered me a place," she said. Her voice carried clean, not raised, not uncertain. Walter inclined his head slightly. "I did." "A house," she went on. "Work, standing." "Yes." She nodded once, as if confirming something already written. Then she looked past him, through the doorway, at the strip of road that cut through Dust Creek. The same road she had watched every day. The same road that had never changed for her, until now. When she spoke again, it wasn't to Walter alone. "I won't be chosen like land," she said. The words didn't strike hard. They settled, like dust after a long ride. Walter didn't move for a second. Then he straightened, slow, thoughtful. "I never intended—" She lifted a hand, just slightly. He stopped, not offended, just listening. "I know what you intended," she said. "You made it plain." A pause. "And I'm not saying no because it's not a good offer." That mattered. Walter's gaze sharpened, just a touch. "Then why?" he asked. Lila let the silence sit between them long enough for the question to carry its full weight. Then she turned, not toward the door, toward Jonah. He didn't step forward, didn't reach out, just stood there, like he finally understood that moving too soon might cost him more than waiting ever had. Lila walked past Walter. The boards beneath her boots gave a quiet creak with each step. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate either. When she reached Jonah, she stopped. Close enough to see the dust still clinging to the crease of his sleeve. Close enough to notice the way his hands stayed still at his sides, like he was holding himself there on purpose. "You said you see me," she said. Jonah nodded once. "I do." She studied him, not searching, just measuring. "Seeing isn't the hard part," she said. "Staying is." The wind shifted outside, pushing a dry line of dust across the doorway. Jonah held her gaze. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. No flourish, no promise dressed up to sound bigger than it was. Just the truth, set down plain. Lila let that sit. Then she gave the smallest nod. Behind them, Walter stepped back, not in defeat, in understanding. He placed his hat back on his head, slow and deliberate. "You've made your choice, Chung," he said. Lila didn't turn back. "Yes." Walter looked at Jonah then, for the first time directly. A long look. Not unfriendly, not approving either. Just weighing the man who had been standing in front of something valuable without knowing it. "Take care of what you've been given," Walter said. Jonah met his eyes. "I intend to." Walter nodded once. Then he turned and walked out into the daylight. The sound of his boots faded into the noise of the town, which slowly, quietly, began to breathe again. Inside, the room felt different, not larger, but clearer. Lila reached back and picked up the key from the counter. For a moment, it rested in her palm. Then she set it down again, not where it had been. Closer to the edge, where someone else could take it. She turned toward the door. Jonah fell into step beside her, not touching, not crowding, just there. Outside, the sun sat high over Dust Creek, Men looked up as they stepped onto the boardwalk, then looked away again, as if the answer they had waited for no longer belonged to them. They walked past the supply station, past the hitching posts, toward the open stretch of road that led out of town. Neither of them spoke for a while. The sound of their boots carried steady over the packed dirt. At the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrub and low grass, Lila slowed. Jonah stopped with her. She looked out over the land. Not grand, not promised, just open. "You got a place in mind?" she asked. Jonah shook his head slightly. "Got work," he said. "Got a patch of land near the creek. Needs fixing." Lila glanced at him. "That all?" "For now." Another pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, "It'd be better with someone keeping the books." Lila looked back out at the land again. The wind moved through the grass in low waves. After a moment, she stepped forward. Jonah followed. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of his place. A small cabin, weather-worn. A fence that leaned more than it stood. Tools left where the last job had ended. Nothing polished. Nothing finished. Lila walked up to the porch, ran her fingers along the rough edge of the railing. Then she pushed the door open. Inside, the room held the smell of wood and dust, and something that hadn't settled yet. She stepped in. Jonah stayed in the doorway a second longer, watching her. Then he followed. Weeks passed the way they do when no one is counting. Boards got straightened. The fence stood a little taller. A table found its place by the window, and a ledger sat on top of it, open to a clean page. One evening, as the light turned gold across the valley, Lila sat there writing. Jonah stood outside the gate, watching her through the open window. He stayed there longer than he meant to. She noticed, didn't look up right away. When she did, she caught him mid-thought. "You're staring," she said. He didn't deny it. "I know." She set the pencil down. "You used to not." He leaned against the gate, the wood creaking softly under his weight. "I used to not know what I was looking at," he said. The words came easier now. Not perfect, but honest. Lila held his gaze a moment longer. Then she picked up the pencil again. This time, her hand didn't pause. Jonah stepped through the gate and crossed the yard. He didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. The evening settled around them, quiet and wide, with nothing left waiting to be said. If you stood there in that fading light, with the dust settling at your feet and the wind moving soft through the grass, you might start to wonder what you would have done. Would you have waited as long as Lila did, holding on to something no one else could see? Or would you have taken the safer road, the one already laid out for you, steady and certain? And if you were Jonah, would you have found the courage in time, or let it pass you by, the way some chances do, quiet and final? There's something about a story like this that stays with you, not because it's grand, but because it feels close, real. Sometimes love doesn't come with thunder or fire. Sometimes it just stands there, patient, unnoticed, waiting for someone to turn and see it. And sometimes, it almost isn't enough. Lila didn't wait forever. That's the part people forget. She chose her own life before anyone else could choose it for her. And that's what made the rest possible. If you've ever had to choose between what's safe and what feels true, tell me where you're watching from tonight. I'd like to know who's out there listening. And if stories like this mean something to you, there are more waiting just ahead. Stories about quiet courage, about second chances, about the kind of love that shows up when it matters most. You're always welcome back here.